Welcome, my name is Mary and I am the designer and podcaster behind Kino Knits. This is a video tutorial where I'm going to show you how to do duplicate stitch. It's used on this ornament here, which is my Dumpster Fire 2020 ornament. And duplicate stitch is this bit here, where 2020 is embroidered on after the piece is knitted. You can find this ornament in a few different places. The primary ones are at kinoknits.com/shop and in the Kino Knits Ravelry store. And if you look just below this video, you will see links to both of those. This right here is a sample that I knit in Leading Men Fiber Arts Showstopper base. It is a fingering weight base, but the great thing about this ornament is that you can knit it in all different weights and just get a different size of ornament. So I'm going to be showing you on a different base today. These are pieces that I have knitted out of a worsted weight. Specifically, it is the Wonderland Yarns March Hare, which, as I said, is a worsted weight base. And you can see I have all my little fire pieces and then my dumpster. When it comes to picking which color I want to use for duplicate stitch, in most versions, most people are going to use this contrast color 3, which is the smallest flame, but it doesn't have to be. You just want to make sure you have good contrast with your actual dumpster. And the best way to do that is to take a picture of all of your colors with a black and white filter. That will really show you which colors contrast the best with your dumpster without having the distraction of the actual tone of the color. So right here, I have a picture that I took of all 4 balls of my worsted yarn. The bottom left one is the dumpster, and you can see which one contrasts the best. And it turns out that it is my contrast color 3. So that's what I'm going to use for my duplicate stitch. Here I have my completed dumpster, and you really want your numbers to be centered on the dumpster. So the way the pattern helps you do that is I have told you to put a locking stitch marker into a certain stitch that will indicate where the middle of this piece is. And then on your chart, you also have a dot that shows you where the center of your template is, where the center of your workspace is. So duplicate stitch, in its basic form, you are just embroidering after the fact, and you're going to trace the path of the stitches that you have already made. For this project, we're going to hold our yarn doubled because that will give us additional coverage. So picking your highest contrast yarn, you're just going to pull out a length of it and thread 2 strands through a nice thick tapestry needle so that you can go ahead and start your embroidering. So since I know where my center stitch is marked, I don't necessarily need to start on that stitch, but I'm going to do the 0 that is just to the left of it when you're looking from this perspective. And I'm going to start at the bottom right corner of that 0. So counting down from my stitch, I know I need to go down 1 and over 1. So right here, this is where I'm going to start. I have picked out the stitch that I'm going to outline with embroidery stitch, and I just come up from the inside of the dumpster at the bottom of that stitch. And I'm just going to pull my yarn. I don't like to tie a knot in the back, although you of course can. This is the inside of your ornament that won't be seen, but I just leave a little bit of a tail for weaving in later. And then I'm just going to trace the path of that stitch. I do that by going under the legs of the stitch above it, and I pull through, and I'm not yanking super tight. I want it to be tidy, but I don't want to mess with the tension at all. And then I come down into the bottom of that stitch. And if I pull that all the way through, you'll see that I've basically just overlapped, outlined 1 existing stitch there. Based on my diagram, I need to go 5 stitches this way, so I will just do the same for 5 stitches going to the left from this perspective. And at any point you can now take out this locking stitch marker because you don't need it to orient you anymore, and it just might be getting in your way. And every once in a while I'm just giving a little tug to make sure that my tension is good, that I'm not pulling too tight, but that my stitches are not also too loose and too floppy. I just give it a little horizontal tug like that. Now that I've gone all the stitches that I need across, I need to work my way down, and it's the same thing. I just find the stitch that is underneath that one, and I'm going to trace it. Now this time I'm going to be going behind the duplicate stitch I created. You can try to go ahead and grab under the base stitch as well, but honestly it really doesn't matter. It's all going to look the same. So as long as you get under the legs of what looks like the stitch above yours, you should be fine. You can see here that I have finished a 0, so I have finished one element of my duplicate stitch, and now I'm going to move on to the 2 that goes here, and I'm just going to count my stitches and compare it against the chart to make sure that it lines up correctly. If you've ever done counted cross stitch, this should be very familiar for you. Instead of the little squares on a counted cross stitch pattern, just count your stockinette stitches. So I've counted down to where I need to be, and now I'm gonna come up and do the 2. So I'm working on this element of my duplicate stitch, and I am out of yarn. I had just pulled out a random length of yarn. So I'm gonna finish off this stitch and flip it to the wrong side. You can see the tails where I started out. And to secure that, I'm just gonna kind of weave it in on the wrong side where it won't be seen. It's kind of tight because I'm using double thickness here, but it'll look good on the front. And I'm just gonna go ahead and pull that through, if I can get my needle out. And cut it here. And then to clean up these pieces, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to thread that back onto my needle and just kind of weave it in the back so that it's not seen, and cut it off. And that's how you finish up the project. But now I'm going to go back and get another length of yarn and finish out my numbering. I'm ready to join back in with a new length of yarn. This time, instead of just pulling through my next stitch and leaving a tail, I'm going to start on the wrong side near where I need to start out, and I'm just going to go ahead and run my yarn through the back of this work as if I were weaving in an end. And I will just kind of pull that back there. So now guess what? When I'm done with this bit, I will not have to weave in that end. And so I can just go ahead and get back started with my duplicate stitching. And there you have it, a beautifully duplicate stitched dumpster. File that under sentences I never thought I'd say. The next step, of course, is assembling all the flame pieces and putting them in the dumpster. I have a separate tutorial video for that, so please just check out the Kino Knits YouTube channel and look for Dumpster Fire 2020 assembly tutorial. Thanks so much for joining me. If you want to see more and get all the latest and greatest news and best discounts on Kino Knits patterns, you can sign up at kinoknits.com/newsletter. And once again, please check out my page, kinoknits.com. Thanks so much for joining me.